Okay, my friends, I'm back again going over Velikovsky. This is going to be quite involved and quite lengthy. They are still attacking him to this very day, claiming no evidence exists and all this nonsense. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a geologist, an anthropologist, paleontologist, any of that stuff, you wasted your whole life because you've been listening to people that have no idea what they're doing. And I will show you this. Velikovsky was the hero. He did the research. They destroyed him. They took his book off the bookshelves after being on the bestseller list 11 weeks in a row because they didn't like what he said. Then they assailed him until he died. And every prediction that he brought forth came true, and no one had any way to know that they would be true until they finally sent out these probes and these telescopes and everything. They could actually see the evidence that Velikovsky pointed to that was written in these ancient texts. So stick around, because this is everything you've been taught is wrong. It's just it's totally wrong. And they don't care if it's wrong or not. All they care about is controlling your mind. So let's see if we can sort this thing out. Okay, my friends, just to bring you back to about Velikovsky, he was a best-selling author. His #1 on the best-selling New York Times list, #1, 11 weeks in a row, and still the academics forced the publisher to pull it off the bookshelves because they didn't like what he was saying. He had too much evidence, and it overthrew everything that they were saying. And that's the only reason. These people didn't even read the book. They admitted they didn't read the book, but it was just too outlandish to be even considered. So this was about people, and the controversy resulted from his works. It does not set out to judge whether Velikovsky and his critics were right or wrong, but to document with sources what was said by who, when, where, and what. There is no doubt that some scientists have labeled some of Velikovsky's work pseudoscience or worse, much worse, but also others who have acknowledged that Velikovsky's made predictions that have turned out to be correct. All of the things he said, he showed. He talked about what would happen to Mars and Venus. And here it is right here, Mars and Venus. And Jupiter giving birth. And I'm showing that that's actual fact. Okay, we're going to get right into the depth of this thing, but he was destroyed, his life was destroyed, and everything he said came to be true, and they all have turned out to be correct. And all of the people that savaged him were just wrong, and it still doesn't matter. They don't care about being right. All they care about is having the control. Worlds in collision, ages in chaos. He wrote all about this, and because he went to everywhere, earth in upheaval, peoples of the sea he wrote about, and all of this stuff is not known by science. They just have no idea about it, so they just sort of gloss it over. You don't hear much about it. They consider it all mythology, and all of these things happened and were recorded by every culture on the face of the planet, and he went to all of them, and he wrote about all of them, and he finally died saying that mankind has lost its way, and where was it? Somewhere at the end of his life, it was published posthumously. Something about amnesia of mankind, something like that, where we just forgot. We forgot everything that happened to us, and it was because it destroys everybody else's domination of science, and it's just nothing but domination now. See, here it is, published posthumously, Mankind and Amnesia. He called the humans Homo ignoramus because they wouldn't allow the truth, and they still don't allow it. We are forced to say what the academics tell us to say, or they won't give you that piece of paper that says you're smart. And that's all it amounts to. There is no thinking anymore in academia. It's the worst place you could possibly imagine. I am shocked by what I have discovered in academia. It's absolute disgrace. Just these two things right here alone show that he knew more than anybody else. This big gouge across Mars, he said that Venus almost hit Mars, or did hit Mars, and this is all the electrical discharge from Venus, because he said there was huge amounts of electrical discharge, and they became entangled with each other, and it also almost hit us. Venus almost hit us. That's what caused the Great Flood. And they had recorded 7 days it approached the Earth. I believe that's the story. Now, it's been a long time since I revisited Velikovsky, so we're going to do it together. So let's get started. As far as I'm concerned, 100% of what he said, well, I mean, that's not correct. Not 100%. I found a lot of things that he said that I don't agree with. But the general premise of what he said about Venus almost hitting Earth and hitting Mars and a catastrophe and a great flood and ages in chaos and all of those things happening at this particular time, only 3,500 years ago, because all my mud fossils are here on the surface of the Earth. They're not even buried. So this didn't happen that long ago. And let's go through it. Okay, I am going to just start right into it. As I did in the last one, we got down to where there was all the different ages, and they said that it starts with a new sun on every one of these ages. Now, and they're talking about us being in the seventh sun age. And, you know, I've heard seventh heaven, all that kind of stuff. All I'm doing is guessing at this point, other than to what Velikovsky reported. But all cultures on the Earth said that they had a number of ages. And all of them had the same stories about these ages. And most of them said it all started with a new sun and new everything, basically. Now, here's what Velikovsky started. Let's just start right out with part 1, chapter 1, the most incredible story. Now, don't forget, there was at least 3 encounters where we were almost hit by Venus or Mars, one or the other, because they both got flopped out of their orbits when this happened. And at that point, the Earth was so impacted that it actually stood still in the sky. It stopped spinning. So here's what happened. He's saying this is the story here, the most incredible story. Joshua ben Nun implored the sun and the moon to stand still. This could have happened if the Earth had ceased for a time to roll along its prescribed path. Is such a disturbance conceivable? Could that possibly have happened? I say yes, and it did happen, he says, and that's what history says. A torrent of large stones coming from the sky, an earthquake, a whirlwind, a disturbance in the movement of the Earth. These 4 phenomena belong together. It appears that a large comet must have passed very near to our planet and disrupted its movement. A part of the stones dispersed in the neck and tail of the comet smote the surface of our Earth, a shattering blow. I'm going to explain this. I wrote a paper back, I think it was 2015, about this exact event, and I think it was biology, and I'll explain to you why. Now, on the other side of the ocean, in the Mexican annals of Kukulkan, the history of the empire of Kukulkan in Mexico, written in Nahua Indian in the 16th century, it is related that during a cosmic catastrophe occurred in the remote past, the night did not end for a long time. So it's dark, which means the Earth stopped spinning. On that side of the Earth, it was dark. We could follow a path around the Earth and inquire into the various traditions concerning the prolonged night and the prolonged day. Because some of them had prolonged nights, the other ones had prolonged days, with the sun and the moon absent or tarrying slowly at different points along the zodiac, while the Earth underwent a bombardment of stones in a world ablaze. The whole world was basically on fire. The oceans were boiling. Everything was coming down, hail. I mean, all these stones. But we must postpone this journey. There was more than one catastrophe when, according to the memory of mankind, the Earth refused to play the chronometer by undisturbed rotation on its axis. In other words, it stopped doing what it normally does. It just normally spins. Every day we get up, it's 24 hours, we go to sleep, and everybody's happy, no questions. Well, at this point in time, it didn't do that. It stopped, and then it started back up again. And there were several different impacts. So, Chapter 2, 52 years earlier. So this was the one that was the disaster, I believe. Now, 52 years earlier, the pre-Columbian written traditions. Now, this is written stuff. This is stuff that was written, glyphs and everything. They spent most of the glyphs and the things that they had on these walls was history. That's where their history was recorded. Those weren't just walls with carvings on them to make, something look nice. Those were the histories, and they were understood. All right, so the pre-Columbians tell us that 52 years before the catastrophe that closely resembles that of the time of Joshua, another catastrophe of world dimensions had occurred. It was the Red World. In the middle of the second millennium before the present era, so that's 1,500 years ago, 1,500 years BC. So I intend to show the Earth underwent one of the greatest catastrophes in its history. So about 1500 BC, one of the greatest catastrophes. A celestial body only shortly before had become a member of the solar system, that is Venus, was born from Jupiter. It came out as a new comet. It came very close to the Earth. The account of this catastrophe can be reconstructed from the evidence supplied by a large number of documents. Everybody had the same documents saying the same things, only they were on different sides of the Earth and they saw it a little bit differently. One of the first visible signs of this encounter was the reddening of the Earth's surface by a fine dust of rusty pigment. Well, that's iron. Iron, it comes from blood. The phenomena of blood raining from the sky has also been observed in limited areas and on a small scale in more recent times. There's still all kind of body parts in the sky raining down. Just as I showed you, Bennu and Psyche are hearts. And I was just told today by somebody, I don't know if it's true or not, that they did do the sample on Bennu, and yes, it is biological, and I want to find out exactly, because they had some scraps left over, and they tested it, apparently. But it's been a long time. It's been 4 months since they came back with it. They should have been able to test it in 15 minutes. It's blood, and that's what I want to talk to them about. I want to see, is that blood? Does it have the same characteristics of blood? There's no reason they should hide this evidence, this sample from Bennu. All right, they spent billions of our dollars to go get it and bring it back. Let's find out what it is. And this was blood rained down from the sky back then in copious quantities. But now it still comes down. If you look up the Kentucky meat shower, that was only 1876, I think it was, and blood, meat, literal meat rained down onto this woman's farm, and they actually ate some of it. They said it tasted like elk. Anyway, here's the hail of stones, and I can explain all of this. I did a paper called Jesus Chemistry. It's on academia.edu. As a matter of fact, I might as well show it to you. The Hail of Stones, the Mexican Annals of Cuculcan describe how a cosmic catastrophe accompanied by a hail of stones. In the oral tradition of Indians, too, the motif is repeated time and again. In some ancient epoch, the sky rained not water, but fire and red-hot stones, which is not different from the Hebrew tradition. All right, let's just see the paper I wrote. All right, this is a paper I put up on academia.edu, August 2016. Jesus Chemistry, is he as advertised? And then I went and I said, what was we looked for was extraordinary materials coincided with worldwide events recorded in this particular time frame. In antiquity, matter is made of molecules. They're made of elements. Matter will only bond with other compatible matter to form minerals, etc. So I was getting deep into the chemistry at this point. So what is this based on? I present this as a clinical work on our history. All original texts and stories and religion works and carvings, tablets, myths of all cultures were considered, because that's what Velikovsky did, and I did it as well. The sources range from scholarly translations to museums to Emanuel Velikovsky, who I must call a hero, and he is, and it's with an I. I'm sorry, Emanuel. His research was legwork, no computers, and many documents that were unimpeachable evidence of Venus' recent arrival. This video explains the documents, 60 points that he made. And I put up a video about all the things that he made that came true, that they said, no, that guy's crazy. He was a friend of Einstein who was about to be acknowledged by Albert, but he died with Velikovsky's book open. Albert was going to say, hey, yeah, the guy was right. He was. Everybody's got to pay attention to him, but he didn't get a chance to. 32 points he made came true about Venus and more since. All against academic theory. A great hero was destroyed by the academics. Now, this is a shocker, and the chemistry, when tied to the recorded events, is similarly, it's just unimpeachable. Red blood falling out of the sky, all of these stones, a fiery comet born from, literally from a vagina on Venus, and I've shown this, which I'll show it to you again in a minute. A short video presents evidence clinically, video case for Jesus, the chemistry, and a story, do they match? Now, at this point, I was wondering maybe Jesus was what came out of Jupiter. But I don't think so now. But anyway, what is the chemistry? What are the events? It states that milk pellets and red dust and stones fell during Exodus. You know, I got to be honest with you. I don't know, because Jesus said it was my body that fell from the sky that fed you in the desert. And he makes a lot of statements that point that it was literally Jesus' body. Jesus states it was literally his body that fell to feed the refugees. Text about this from John. At this, the Jews began to grumble about Jesus because he had said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. They were asking, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he say, I have come down from heaven? And Jesus says, stop your grumbling among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. And at that point, I thought, well, Jupiter was supposed to be the god of this universe, of this solar system. So is he the son of Jupiter? Son of God? So I will raise him up in the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they will all be taught by God. Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. So only Jesus has ever seen God. Truly, truly, I tell you, he who believes has eternal life. I am the bread of life. This is what was, it's coming back to me. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. So this is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that anyone may eat of it and not die. This is what confused me, because they ate the bread, which was supposedly, if it was Jesus' body, they died. Now he's back down here giving more bread, which is words at this point, it would appear to me. All right, the bread that comes down from heaven, so that anyone may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. He could be both. He could have been the living bread that came down from heaven, and he could be coming down again, giving words like bread. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. That makes sense. And this bread which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. Boy, I'll tell you, it's sounding more and more like I was right back then. At this, the Jews began to argue among themselves. How can this man give us his flesh to eat? Now, here's what I had to say. The placenta is milky, gelatinous afterbirth, and it would rain in pellets around the earth as dried milk. The red dust that fell heavily and afterbirth blood would do this because it's bloody stuff fell all over the earth, red blood. It's dense red iron, ferrous oxide. Stones fell. That would be the umbilical cord, because it's very, very fibrous and heavy and tough. It's made of silicates, all weaved into a Chinese finger trap configuration so that it can move all around. And that would have shattered, and all these stones would have come out and slaughtered the earth, which is exactly what it said. All these events happened at the same dates and recorded around the world. So everybody had the same story. 60 text points Professor Velikovsky made. These are all his points. This is the Velikovsky research based on the facts. All right, this statement in Revelation 12 says God's Son was born in space. All right, because this, I think, already happened, Revelation 12. They talk about eating the babies by these giant dragons, and this is what it says right here. Revelation 12. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun. She's so big she's standing on the moon. The moon is under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. All right, so she's up in the heavens, standing on the moon. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Listen to this. Another sign appeared in the heaven, an enormous red dragon. 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns on his heads. Its tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. Now let's just take that one statement. The tail swept 1/3 of the stars. There were 600 watcher angels. 1/3 is 200. In the Bible, it says that Satan took 200 of his buddies and they signed a pact and came to earth, swept 200 of them to earth, which is 1/3. Now, the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment he was born. And that's what was happening. It's all written in the ancient text in Apollodorus. All right? She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. That appears to me to be Zeus. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1260 days. Then war broke out in the heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. He was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. He was thrown to earth. The great dragon was hurled down. I believe that was Typhon. That ancient serpent called the devil, Satan, who leads the world astray, he was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. Because they were all over the earth. The earth is nothing but corpses and bodies, exactly what Jesus said. Comet 67P is a body part. There's no question. It's the hip of a body. A dragon carcass is in Morocco. This is in 2016. I was pointing this all out. The video shows a fake white one, and at the time was admitted as possibly only not one. It turned out fake. They show fake. Everybody's making fake dragons and trying to make it look like what I was showing was crazy, but it's not. It's right here on Google Earth. Anybody can look at it. The birth of Venus is a fiery comet during the Exodus, which is 3,500 years or so ago. It was recorded in Egypt in the Bible, and the earth was wrenched during this time. Venus was a comet and almost destroyed Earth and killed Mars, wiped Mars right out. Now, what about the giants in the Earth? All right, a mudfossil discovery in 2012 in Middletown, which is here, me, led to a detailed chemical anatomical study, 3 DNA tests, 7 CAT scans, much lab chemistry creates the feldspar and associated tissue fossilization. In addition, an autopsy teacher that trains others worldwide agrees these are creatures. He does autopsies on all these, no question whatsoever. He doesn't want his name used because he would be attacked. All right? The DNA was 100% human in my DNA test, and I have the DNA test there on mine. All the specimens were absolutely no question whatsoever. The giant fingertips had a fingernail bed on it and the fingerprints. I took very, very good care and caution. I drilled into the specimens. I didn't take it off the surface. The conclusion is that chemistry supports the Jesus story. Well, it does seem to. I had forgot I had this much detail on it. I knew I had all that detail, but I sort of, this has been a long journey. But I now don't believe that Jupiter was God. At first I thought Jupiter was God and his son was Jesus, and Jesus was the comet. And he was the morning star. And, geez, I'll tell you, it does say that. He says, I am the morning star. And they attributed that comet. This is deep. And it never gets undeep. So let's just keep going. All right, yeah, see, this it gets confusing. Why are both Jesus and Satan referred to as the morning star? I am the bright morning star, hope for the coming new day. Aren't Jesus and Satan both referred to as the morning star? Lucifer, Satan, Jesus, yikes. You see right here? His name is Lucifer, or literally light bearer. Light is, Jesus said, we come from the light. And he had been God's anointed cherub, the highest order of angelic being. He was a beautiful morning star. Now this is the Nag Hammadi text. These are Gnostics, which are they're religious sects, but they're documenting our history, and this was all written by Doubting Thomas, who was Jesus' scribe, and he was writing his sayings. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke while he was walking around living, and Didymus Judas Thomas, who was Doubting Thomas, wrote down. And it says, if you find out the interpretation of these sayings, you will not experience death. He also said, Jesus said, let him who seeks, like us, continue seeking until we find. When we find, we will become troubled. When we become troubled, we will be astonished, and we will rule over all the rest, because we will be the ones with the knowledge of truth. Jesus said, recognize what is in your sight, and that which is hidden from you will become plain to you. There is nothing hidden which will not become manifest. Now, if Jesus was the light bearer and we come from the light, this sort of works. This is number 50. Jesus said, if they say to you, where did you come from? Say to them, we came from the light. We came from the light. The place where the light came into being on its own accord, all by itself, and established itself and became manifest through their image. What that means is the light came out of the sun all on its own accord. You don't have to do anything, it just spits out. And then it became manifest, which means it became turned into something in their image, which is God's image, apparently. If they say to you, is it you? Say, we are its children. We are the elect of the living Father. So we are the children of the light. We are also light, but it's congealed into a manifest image. Right? So we are the elect. We have special molecules in us. For some reason, we became alive. Because there's a lot of stuff that's not actually walking around living and doing things. It's monitor, my keyboard, all this stuff is just stuff. We are the elect of the living Father. If they ask you, what is the sign of your Father in you? Say to them, it is movement and repose. Movement is what we do. We move all the time, and light and all kinds of things, and the sun and the moon, that's movement. And then there's repose, where it just doesn't move. It's just resting, just resting. So it's just like Tesla said, it's all vibration. It's all vibration. And that's what the sign of him is in us. And he also said, Jesus said, whoever has come to understand the world has found only a corpse. All right. So Jesus said, whoever has come to understand the world has found only a corpse. And then whoever has found a corpse is superior to the world, because you know more than basically everybody else. Very, very few people understand this, and when they do get confronted with it, they don't want to know about it. Stay away from me. Don't tell me these things. I'm happy being mental-sided. I listen to what my professors say, and I do what they say, and I'm just walking around in circles. And that's what the human race is doing right now, most of it. Okay, my friends, this is probably going to be the hardest video I've ever done. I was going to actually start a school. In 2015 or so, I started to really slaughter the internet with all these papers. And this is from academia.edu. These are all my different papers about all the different topics that I discussed, and particle theory and giants and history and dark matter and the universe and the nature of matter and gases and electron flood theory and so all kinds of stuff. And I did a bunch of papers, and all these papers are up there, and I was going to really start to show. And this is Atlantis as Plato describes, and it fits the eye of the Sahara. This is back in 2015. This was pretty good. Maybe I'll show you that one. Yeah, as a matter of fact, let's take a look at this one. Now, what happened here is I was searching the eye of the Sahara, and I had thought that it looked just like Atlantis. And I went back to all Plato's stuff. And I went through all of his history of what he had. And he said, and this is what his actual words were. And the ancient stories are very convincing to me. He said, my great-grandfather, Dropidas, had the original writings, and it's still in his possession, which is Plato, and was carefully studied by me when I was a child. That's Plato. His great-grandfather got it from Solon, who was the major priest of Egypt. Or, well, he met with all the major priests of Egypt. And he no question, he visited Egypt for 10 years and learned everything of their ancient past. This work was in the bloodline. Is there proof positive here or just speculation? So I looked into the Eye of the Sahara, and boy, I'll tell you, it's basically exactly what he said. And the time frames, I don't know. You'd have to read all this, but and then I went, could Santorini or Crete be Atlantis? And I went against all these different things, and who said what about Egypt and Ethiopia and all this stuff, and this is the end of the paper. But what's this here? Well, it's my interpretation of it was, at this point, 2015, that yes, Atlantis could very well be the Eye of the Sahara. And also, everything drained right off over the top of Atlantis. It looks like it all just ran out into the ocean, which is what Plato says. All of this stuff fits the Eye of the Sahara. And I studied this for several years. And then something very, very strange happened. Okay, I'm sure you realize this is Africa. And this right here is the Eye of the Sahara. And it sure looks to me like it fits what Plato said about Atlantis. And notice this. First of all, I studied this very, very closely. And all of these little inlet-looking things sure look like they could have been for boat docks. All right? And all these, the whole thing, every one of them has these boat dock-looking slips coming in. All right. At first, you see, like here, what's that? They look like some little channels were coming in, and they're parking their boats here, and then they came up here onto the ring, and they did whatever they did up there, and they go all the way around the whole thing. Every one of them, they all have this structures. Now, I've come to realize they may not be boat docks, but we'll talk about that later. This drew my attention for a couple of years, and I studied every little detail of it, and I know things about this that nobody knows about. And there was a straits over here, which Plato said it was right outside the straits. Well, that's a pretty straight straits as far as I'm concerned. And I also noticed that, according to Plato, everything washed over the top of Atlantis, and they will never speak of mud again. There was so much. Well, this sure looks like a lot of stuff ran out here. I mean, I can't see any other possibility there, do you? It looked like everything washed out this way, and it actually created the Cape Verde Islands. It would have piled up here and then eventually skirted off the edges just like that. And this is what they call an alluvial plain. It's just a big flat bunch of mud that ran out there. That's what Plato says. He will never speak of mud again. So now here I am for, at least a year or two, deeply analyzing this. And I know, like I said, I know things about this nobody has a clue about. And so I started, doing my posting about it, wrote the paper about it, and did videos about it and all that stuff, but nobody took any interest. So let me just show you this. All right, so again, I'm studying the Eye of the Sahara, and I'm writing papers about the giants and the myth and the history and the religion. This is from 2015. I had already had all my DNA tests done, CAT scans, and all this stuff. So rejected and so destroyed by academia that I just couldn't get anybody to even talk to me. Literally, I was shut down everywhere. Every time I posted something, it got deleted. All my emails and everything turned into spam for everybody. Somehow they put a tag on it. Somehow you get it and it says, "Hey, watch out, this guy's insane," that type of thing. If you open this up, you'll probably die. So I became destroyed. So all of these papers, and I mean, I got a lot of papers here. I was going to do this whole thing. I had it all set up to do, and everything was ready to go, and it didn't end up working out so good. Anyway, but here's my point, is I had discovered this stuff earlier, and the reason I discovered it is I got a message. Somehow it just came into my mind first thing in the morning. One morning I woke up, I said to my wife, there's something in the woods calling my name. I'm going to go out there and see what's going on. And I thought maybe I'd find a arrowhead or some silly thing like that. I had no clue about giants or any of that. Of course, sure enough, I found giant mud fossils, and there's no question whatsoever. They've been DNA tested and CAT scanned, and by this time, it was all done. And I had figured, no question, this would be looked at. And it wasn't looked at. Not only that, I was destroyed. Same thing happened to Velikovsky, and that's why I write about him all the time. He was the hero, and without his research, I wouldn't have known it. So I give it credit to him. But then I enhanced that research by having Google Earth and all the other things I'm showing you right now. But here's what happened. 2015 or so, I realized I'm not going to ever get this done. I was for 5 years, not a single word. My family turned against me. Everybody turned against me. I had no friends. I had nothing, zero. I was by myself, sitting in, and I still do it. That's never changed. However, at this point, I'm so frustrated. I'm sitting here, and I'm in despair, literal despair. And I actually said out loud, I said, God, you got the wrong guy. I cannot do this. I cannot get this across. Because my message was, these things are for you to see and for others as a test. I said, I can't get the test out. And that happened right after I found the giants. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but I just found the giants. I came in, and the thing popped up and said, these things are for you to see and for others as a test. And I said, whoa. So that drove me to really, that's what really set me off to make all these papers and talk about the giants and myth and religion and all that stuff. Because we need to talk about it. It's not what we were told. It's absolutely nothing like what we were told. So I'm saying to God, I can't do this. They won't listen to me. It's just never going to happen. And you got the wrong guy. Go find somebody else, basically. Whatever can I do? I can't get it done. And I hear literally a voice coming from behind me saying, look in Morocco. And I had the TV on. I turned around and looked, and the TV's just on some car commercial. It had nothing to do with Morocco. But I heard those words, and I said, well, I'll look in Morocco. And as soon as I did, the thing that I was always talking about, the Eye of the Sahara, was right here, and right above it was Typhon, the dragon, and the giant fish. I've been looking at this for years. I never saw it. And within 30 seconds, I could see the dragon. I could see his body running down here, all of the dragon's scales, all in his throat, running all the way down. I could actually see where his throat was cut Exactly what Velikovsky had reported. I knew about what Velikovsky said and the ancient text said, but I just never knew this thing was here. All I was looking at was Atlantis. But in the ancient text, it says Typhon was attacking the gods, and the gods turned themselves into animals, and he was spouting a great jet of fire, which is, I'm telling you, I've shown this hundreds of times, hundreds. And again, not a single person will pay attention other than you people who are following me here. Nobody in academia is zero. Zero. And they are just very, very distraught at my research. They just hate it. And so there is no academics that are going to pay any attention to this reality. Now, I have also found something that disturbs me, and it relates to Jesus Christ being called the light bearer and the morning star. And also Lucifer was called the light bearer and the morning star. Now, this where it gets very dicey, because as far as I'm concerned, Jesus is the only thing, he's the one I want to find. But why does it say this? Why are both Jesus and Satan referred to as the morning star? And Jesus said his body fed the refugees in the desert during the Exodus. And all of the turmoil that Velikovsky talks about, the red blood that fell all over the earth, the stones that fell, the burning hot fire that fell, the manna that fell, all of that stuff is basically biology. Red blood, blood. The manna, as far as I'm concerned, was probably the birth sac, which is all nothing but, the placenta is nothing but food for the baby. So as it cooked around the earth, it would fall as this manna. As far as I'm concerned, that's possible. And the other thing was the extreme amounts of stones. Stones fell like everywhere. And that would have been from the umbilical cord. An umbilical cord is tiny, tiny little shards of things that all fit together in like a Chinese finger trap, and so it can weave and twist and bend and be very flexible and not kink or any of that stuff. But it's all made of little bits and pieces, and when it came through the atmosphere, it would have just turned into shards of just unbelievable amount of stones. Not enormous stones, very small ones, but because they're all not very small either, but just scads of them. Now, Jesus said it was my body that fed you in the desert. And I wrote a paper on that too. Hold on, see if I can find that paper. All right, here it is, right from 2016. Jesus' chemistry. Is he as advertised? What chemistry is there? Mudfossil Research did the research and looked for what extraordinary materials coincided with worldwide events recorded in antiquity. Matter is made of molecules, made of elements. Matter will only bond with other compatible matter to form minerals, etc. This is the Mudfossil part. Now, what is my thing based on? What I am basing all this stuff on? I present this as a clinical work on our history. All original texts and stories and religious works and carvings, tablets, myths, all of that stuff from every culture is considered. And skip anybody, because Velikovsky didn't either. The sources range from scholarly translations to museums to Immanuel Velikovsky, who was my hero, and it's spelled with an I was wrong back then. His research was legwork, no computers, and many documents that were unimpeachable evidence of Venus' recent arrival. It was only supposed to be like 3,500 years ago or so that Venus was literally born from the feared god Jupiter. This is where it really gets tricky. This is where it gets into the deep, who was Jesus? He was the Son of God. Who was God? and what came out of Venus, which is all recorded. It's 100% recorded in history, so it's not something that didn't happen. It's why did it happen, how did it happen, and all that stuff. Anyway, Velikovsky was a friend of Einstein. Einstein was about to endorse him when he died with his book open on his bed. And the chemistry is unimpeachable. It's unimpeachable. It's all blood fell and all this stuff. And here's what the chemistry was in the events. It stated that milk pellets, red dust, and stone fell during the Exodus. And that's when Earth was wrenched and flooded, basically. And there was 3 events that happened. And Jesus stated it was literally his literal body that fell to feed the refugees. He said, "My body fed you in the desert." And this is it right here. Text about this from John 4. At this, the Jews began to grumble about Jesus because he said, "I am the bread that came down from heaven." They were asking, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he say, "I have come down from heaven"? Jesus says, stop your grumbling. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. So the Father is God who sent his Son, Jesus. And they can't go unless they go to Jesus. And I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they will all be taught by God. Right? Everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. Right? So once you learn, you have to go to Jesus. And I believe Jesus is the salvation of everything. So I'm not going against Jesus whatsoever here. Don't even think of that for 1 second. This is in confirmation of Jesus as being deeply tied to God. Now, this is very, very confusing when they put Satan and Lucifer as the light bearer and the morning star, and Jesus as the light bearer and morning star. It's very confusing, but this is what we need to work out. So he says, everyone who has heard the Father and learned from him comes to me. Not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who is from God, which is Jesus apparently. Only he has seen the Father. All right? Truly, truly, I tell you, he who believes has eternal life. All right? There were gods, and they had unending lives, is what they say. And can we be turned into literal gods and get eternal life? To be determined. He says, I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. Now he's saying he was the manna in the wilderness, but a lot of the fathers ate but they still died because they didn't believe. So this is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that anyone may eat of it and not die. But you have to eat of the bread of the knowledge of Christ and believe in it. And don't just say, okay, I'm all good. No. And all that stuff is nonsense and go doing all kinds of terrible things. Which is what the world right now is just saturated with absolute disgusting things. Anyway, so this is the bread that comes down from heaven, so anyone may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And this bread which I give for the life of the world is my flesh. At this, the Jews began to argue among themselves, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Well, this is a lot of stuff we have to talk about. Now, I said right here, the placenta is milky, gelatinous afterbirth, and it would rain in pellets as dried milk, which was the manna. Red dust fell heavily. Afterbirth is blood. There's blood and, the afterbirth. It would do it in dense red iron, FeO3, red blood. Stones fell. An umbilical cord is silicates, and they're formed in a Chinese finger trap configuration. It would shatter into just bazillions of stones. All these events happen at the same dates recorded around the world. 60 points Velikovsky made that all came true. Velikovsky research is based on facts. And this, I think, already happened. A great sign appeared in the heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and a moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Now, this is interesting, because that means the moon was already here. She was clothed with the sun, so the moon already had to be here. Apparently the earth had to be here as well. She got a crown of 12 stars on her head. There was 12 disciples. I don't know if that means anything. Anyway, she was pregnant, cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Another sign appeared in the heaven, an enormous red dragon. Had 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns on its head, whatever that means, whether it was 7 different races or whatever, nations. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth, which was, out of 600 watchers, a third is 200. And that's the 200 signed a deal and said, let's go down and party up and have sex with all the women down there. And he swept a third of them down. Now, they could morph. It's called metamorphosis, just like a butterfly comes out of a chrysalis, out of a caterpillar. They could morph into whatever they wanted, and they turned into really hot-looking stud guys and came down and had sex with all the women when they found out that women were pretty good-looking down here. And Zeus apparently wanted to keep them stupid as like animals, so that they could just, I don't know, maybe they figured that would be a lot more fun to run around with the women. The women wouldn't have any clue what they're doing. They just have sex and party like crazy. But instead, they brought down all the other attributes of society, which is makeup and fancy dresses and all that stuff. And then everything turned crazy after that. But anyway, this is about the dragon that was going to eat the baby. And Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back, but they were not strong enough. They were hurled to earth. And as far as I'm concerned, that's Typhon. And it's exactly as he's described in the ancient texts. And he was attacking the gods, and they turned themselves into animals. And this one here didn't get away, turned into a fish, and didn't quite make it. All right, and this is all the nasty stuff coming out of Typhon's. It actually comes from the beards. See all that nasty stuff coming out of there? That's from his beard. And that stuff came down from his beard and literally combusted on the back of the fish. This is the fish's fin. And it ate right into his vital flesh right here. Ate right down into his vital flesh. You can see the blood vessels and the veins and the arteries and the capillaries and the lymphatic systems. Everything's right here. And that's because the toxin ate right through the scales of that fish. Now, again, I'm going to leave it at this for now. We need to do a lot of talking because, like I say, I was looking at this for years. I never saw that. And then I got the message, say, look up there. Now, all I can say is I'm getting these messages, and everything I'm reading says no stone will be left unturned. Whatever's buried will be unburied, and whatever's unseen will be seen. So I'm going to just show what it is. Now, you have to make up your own mind. What do you take out of this? I'm going with Jesus 100%. So don't think that any of this is against Jesus or religion or God or anything. I don't know what's going to happen to us when we die. But from everything I've read, there is no real death. There's a transition into something. And it can be very good or it can be very bad, is what I'm seeing. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But I don't see many people paying attention. And I am. So if you want to pay attention, stick around. Because I got a lot to say about this. And there's a lot more. I've got a lot of time on this. These go back 6, 7, 8 years. More than that even. And I've been doing this 15 years. This was from 2016. That was 8 years ago. And I've learned a lot since this. So let's just keep moving forward, my friends. I love you all. And all I can say is, is things are going terribly, terribly wrong. And I think this was well predicted in the past. They say it comes, it goes, it comes, it goes, it comes, it goes, and we're at the point where it's going to ready to go. And I believe Venus, that was erupted from Jupiter, has another one coming out very soon, and that will wipe the planet clean once again. And if it looks to me, I could be wrong, but like I say, I've shown this many times, and the Venus Great Red Spot is changing dramatically. And Shoemaker-Levy impact in 1995 or 94 could possibly have been the insemination. Who knows? But I can tell you one thing, that red spot is a vagina, and it is looking like it's ready to give birth. So if you want reality, here it is. Maybe it's crazy, maybe it isn't. You're the one who has to make the decision. I'm just putting out evidence. I'm a material scientist. I put it out, and then I think, what could it mean? And I have a future just like you have, which means is I'm going to die, and then whatever happens, happens. I don't like to go into a room without knowing what's in that room, especially when that room could be full of who knows what. So I'm trying to find out what's in that room, and you want to find out? Come along with me. And I have one last thing to say about our leaders and our academics and so forth. It was all written that they would go against humanity, and they have this one last chance to turn around. And I have found that none will. Now, they still have enormous control over society. You cannot do anything against academia or against political or, institutions. They run everything now. And you are subservient to them, as I am, but I don't care anymore because I just don't care. Now, if you do, and your life is dependent upon them now, they can destroy your life, which they did. They destroyed Velikovsky's life. They destroyed anybody's life that will stand up against them. But I really don't have a whole big life going on at the moment, so not much more they can do to me other than physical bodily damage. And I at this point, I just don't even care anymore. I want truth. I'm looking for eternity. And I look back and you see these guys they let them burn them at the stake, and so they knew what they were doing. They said, no, I'm not going to turn against this. If I do, I'm screwed. So they took their end in. And had to realize eternity. Now, there's other religions that say you can say with your mouth words that you don't feel in your heart, and they did that because they knew if you stood up for Jesus and so forth, they would kill you. So they were allowing the believers to say with their mouth words that they did not feel in their heart. That was the message to the believers. It was okay, because they'll kill you. We understand. You're in a position where there's nothing you can do. Just say, oh, I don't believe. But if your heart doesn't believe, then you're really in trouble. If your mouth says it doesn't believe, well, it's no big deal. But if your heart says, I don't believe, now you're really in trouble. So at this point, I'm a 100% believer. I don't know about you. Do what you will, think what you will. And I know there's a lot of people hate religion, they hate the thought of God, and they all live behind the ivy walls, my friends. I haven't found one there that has any interest in truth, first of all, and God last of all. All right? And I love you all. Goodbye.